Welcome, my friends, to another episode of Shoot First, Ask Questions Later. Today we are joined by the eminent Rabbi Bezalel Naor, and we are going to be discussing a very interesting topic in one of his latest books, The Project of Hasidism, and the Hasidic practice of praying after the prescribed time, after the appropriate zmanim. This is a topic that I've wanted to do for quite a while, and I appreciate that we have an expert such as yourself with us for that today. And for our listeners who may not yet be familiar, Rabbi Naor is a lifelong student of the teachings of Rabbi Abraham Isaac HaKohen Kook. He translated Rav Kook's seminal work Orot, as well as several other books by Rav Kook as well. Rabbi Naor is the author of the original studies of Jewish thought in both English and Hebrew, and most recently, not said this is a little bit older, but some time ago, I should say, Mecholat Tzadikim, Dance Circle of the Righteous, a comparative analysis of the cosmologies of Italian Kabbalist Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto and the Chabad Chassidic interpreter Rabbi Isaac of Hummel. Rabbi Naor is presently at work, or was at work, on his historical novel as well as a collection of mystical poems. And I think the bio I have is a little bit dated. I know you also are the author of The Legends of Rabba Bar Chana, which I have to say was quite a otherworldly experience reading through it and attempting to understand it, and then the graphics that went along. It's definitely something to put on the Jewish coffee table. And your latest work is the Project of Hasidism. So maybe just tell us a little bit about kind of, you have a very interesting niche like Hasidic literature, a little bit academic, very mystical. Just tell me a little bit about kind of your publishing career a little bit. And then I'd love to kind of get into this particular sugya about the Hasidim and the prescribed prayer times.
Well, I think you mentioned a lot of my bio. I started out in yeshiva, studying Nigla, Gefes, that's Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos, and but I always had a mystical bent, going back to early childhood, and that attracted me to uh, Kabbalah and Hasidut, but also Machshavet Yisrael, Jewish thought or Jewish philosophy. And when I was about 20, I discovered the writings of Rav Kook. That's Avram Yitzhak Cohen Cook, and he's been my Rebbe Muvhak ever since.
Mhm. What I'm curious, just what about Hasidic literature and Rav Kook in particular piqued your interest?
Well, this book, The Project of Hasidism, is very much based on Rav Kook's perspective on what the Baal Shem Tov was all about, namely that it was an attempt to bring back the lost art of prophecy, of nevuah.
Hmm.
Once upon a time, Jews were a prophetic people, and then we lost that, and it's Rav Kook's interpretation of history that the Baal Shem Tov was attempting to bring that back.
Wow. So wait a minute. What does that mean to bring prophecy back in practical terms? I know I'm asking you to kind of like summarize a lot of your research, but I mean just kind of give me like the spark notes over here. How does, I'm interested, how do I enroll in Prophet Academy?
Right. Okay, so starting at the beginning of Beit Sheni, which is the
Oh, we're going
second
really far back
temple
here.
period, uh, yeah, we lost prophecy, and Judaism became cerebral,
Hmm.
Talmudic, and that continued for the next 2 millennia. And you had these visionaries, the Baal Shem Tov, and also especially his great grandson, Rabbi Nachman of Braslav, who were trying to bring back Nivuah. Now, how do you bring it back? Uh, for starters, you need to activate what they call the Koach HaMedameh, which is the imaginative faculty. So, if you sit in the Beit Midrash and study Talmud all day, that's fine, but that's Seichel. That's your intellect, but that's not your imagination. Now, how do you activate imagination?
Hmm.
So here, the Baal Shem Tov came along with music, which comes right out of the prophetic tradition, because when it describes Elisha prophesying, it says, "V'haya kinagen haminagen,"
Hmm.
that when the musician began to play music, that's when Elisha was seized by the prophetic spirit. So there's song, there's also dance, rikud, storytelling, sipurei masiot. So these are various ways to activate and to ignite and kindle the imaginative faculty.
Interesting. So is the if I tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it sounds almost like from your framework that you're describing, or I guess the Hasidic framework that you're describing, is that back in the day, the Navi prevailed, and nowadays, as the Talmud says, Chacham Adif Mi Navi, it's about the scholar, it's not about the prophet anymore. But Chadei Shemenu Kekedem, let us renew the days of old and bring things back to the prophetic era. So almost like the Talmudic analysis and all of the legalistic thinking that we've accustomed ourselves in what we call Nigla, the revealed Torah, which is what we spend time studying Talmud and Shulchan Aruch and the Nosei Kalim, the commentaries, etc. Are you saying that that's kind of like b'diavad? It's regrettable that we're spending all of our time on these technicalities?
Well, I wouldn't call it a bidyavat, but what you must know is that the Rambam, who's the arch rationalist, I mean, he is
Hmm.
the voice of rational Judaism. Uh, in the preamble to Sefer HaMitzvot, the Book of Commandments, there are 14 Shorashim. And at the end of the Shorashim, the Rambam mentions that Nevuah will come back again. Also, in his Igeret Teman, which was the epistle to the Jews of Yemen,
Yeah, we've covered that.
he actually gives a date, which he said he received from his ancestors, the exact date in the 1200s when prophecy will come back. So it's interesting and perhaps highly ironic that the man who is the paragon of rational Judaism, of halachic Judaism, is also the man who is looking forward to Nevuah. By the way, from Yeshua Heschel, in the Levi Ginsburg Festschrift, wrote an amazing article.
Oh.
It's been translated into English. By the way, Heschel himself, whom I had the privilege of meeting, recommended the article to me. And the title in English would be something like, "Did Rambam believe that he had achieved prophecy?"
Hmm. Right, doesn't right,
And
Rambam
and
talks about
also the
Aristotle nearly achieving prophecy.
and also scattered through Rambam's works are allusions to his Sefer Nevuah, that he's writing a book on prophecy.
Huh.
It seems he never got around to that, but the scholarly consensus is that in the Moreh HaNevuchim, the Guide of the Perplexed, in the second part, there's a whole section of prophecy, and the scholarly consensus is that the material that was earmarked for the Sefer Nevuah was integrated into the Moreh Nevuchim.
Uh-huh.
So again, it's highly ironic that the man who is the voice of rational Judaism and the greatest halachist in the post-Talmudic period is someone who is keenly interested in this phenomenon of prophecy.
Right. But I guess, you're the expert here, so fill me in. I could imagine that,
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine Leisman de Paleg, that everybody would be pro if we could get Nevuah back going. I mean, it's within the tradition, it's within the Tanakh, it's acknowledged. No one seems to be really denying it outright, is my understanding. But Rambam was always about intellectual perfection. And through intellectual cultivation, that was a huge ingredient in reaching the prophetic stage. That's why I think he writes that even Aristotle, had he fixed up some of his belief system and mitos, his intellect could have brought him to Nevuah. But the Hasidic approach, kind of like you said, maybe focused more on the musical, emotional experience. So maybe it's less the goal and more the methods that might be one of the big distinctions. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Hmm. There are people within Judaism who get down on Aristotle, that you'll find statements that he was a mushchat, that he had midot lo tovot. I don't recall the Rambam ever saying that. That's more, I think, a Hasidic thing. But there's another handle on all of this, and that's the Sufi tradition.
Oh, wow.
At the end of Moreh Nevuchim, this is now Chele Gimel, Perik Nun Aleph. There's a whole chapter that the commentaries refer to as Perik HaMitboded, and it's about Hitbodedut, which is something else that we should be discussing, especially in Breslov Hasidism, Hisbodedus. But the Rambam has that, but the one who amplifies it is his son, Rabbeinu Avraham.
Hmm.
That's Abraham Maimonides, who has quite a bit to say about the Sufi tradition, and he feels that they took that over from our prophetic tradition. So this is another handle on all of this. The Rambam, but even more his son, Rabbeinu Avram's kinship to Sufism, which is the Islamic mystical tradition, and
Yeah.
Hitbodedot. But I think we're supposed to be talking about.
Yes, yeah. So this is a good. You read my mind. So this is a good introduction, just to kind of lay some of the groundwork here. But so I'm not an expert in the battles between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim, who are the ones who are fighting against the Hasidim. It's always interesting that they get called the Misnagdim. It makes it sound like they're already kind of in a weak position because they're just opposing the Hasidim. It makes it sound like the Hasidim are the establishment, Misnagdim are not.
Uh,
But we'll leave that aside. One of the main flashpoints between them was the debate over zmanim. And the only information I really come into this with is knowing that the Misnagdim said, hey, wait a minute. We have a Talmud. We have halacha. Halacha has prescribed times. 3 halachic hours into the day is the latest for Shema. 4 is for Shemona Esrei and Birchos Kriya Shema. Like we have regulations of when to daven certain things. And then apparently many in the Hasidische Welt, in the Hasidic world, simply just disregarded it. Maybe you could correct me. That's how I understand it. And that's basically what I walk in with. I imagine many of our listeners may be vaguely familiar. Maybe they know more than I do. You certainly know more than I do. And before we jumped on, you pointed me to the Sha'agas Aryeh as well as several other chuvos. So this isn't just a machshava, Jewish philosophy topic, but this is really where Jewish philosophy and halacha intersect with each other. And that's kind of those are always my favorite topics. So can you kind of just maybe I'll give you the mic for a few minutes here, kind of just like lay out the story of how this all happened in the first place?
yeah. A name that comes up in this regard is Hayudia Kadosh, the Holy Jew, which was the epithet for Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak Rabinovich of Pshischa. He founds a whole school of Polish Hasidism known as Pshischa. And it seems that he was someone who relaxed the times of prayer. But in my research, I found that it really does precede him.
Oh.
This comes up very early in the Hasidic movement. And you mentioned this tshuva of the Sha'agas Aryeh. And this
Mhm.
is Siman Tet Vav. That's chapter 15 in the Sha'agas Aryeh, where he's inveighing against the Megillat Esther, where this Rabbi Yitzchak Leon ibn Sur, who lived in Ancona, Italy in the 1500s, wrote a work, Megillat Esther, which is fascinating. I had mentioned earlier the Sefer Mitzvot of the Rambam.
Yes.
And when you study the Sefer Mitzvot of the Rambam, you're getting alongside the critique of the Ramban, who's constantly critiquing the Rambam's positions. And then you get this Rabbi Yitzchak Leon ibn Sur in Megillat Esther, who's defending Rambam's positions against the attacks of Ramban.
Right. Like I think most iconically in Rambam's omission of there being a mitzvah to move to Eretz Yisrael. I mean, I'm sure there are other instances that the Megillah Esther says something really important for us, but I feel like it was like one of those one-hit wonders that whenever I hear the Megillah Esther on the Rambam Sefer Mitzvos, it invariably is that sugya.
Yeah,
Just because I'm an Amaritz and I don't know the other ones.
Well, if you're an Amaritz, then I feel sorry for the rest of us. But yeah, that's the most famous position of Megillat Esther. The Rebbe of Satmar, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum, in his Vayol Moshe, quoted it, where Megillat Esther is explaining why Rambam doesn't count Yeshivat Eretz Yisrael as a mitzvah, whereas the Ramban does. And the Megillat Esther said because, we have the Shalosh Shavuot, and it may be problematic to go up to Eretz Yisrael today. And one of the guidelines of Rambam in the Shorashim, in order to be considered one of the Taryag mitzvot, the mitzvah has to exist in perpetuity. But if it doesn't exist in a certain period in history, then it's not counted as one of the Taryag. But this is a minority opinion of the Megillat Esther. Before Rabbi Teitelbaum, someone who held of this Megillat Esther is Reb Tzadok HaKohen. Interestingly enough, in the Divrei Sofrim, and this is Siman Yodalet, Reb Tzadok writes, Mitzvah Yeshivat Eretz Yisrael, Nireli Ikar Ki Megillat Esther, the Sefer Mitzvot, Sof Mitzvot Esther, Mitzvah Tasei Dalet. But other than Reb Tzadok and the Vayol Moshe, very few people hold of that Megillat Esther.
Right.
Now, here's another one, which is even more incredible. And I'm surprised more people haven't heard of it, where the Megillat Esther writes, and this is Mitzvah Tasei Hey, the fifth positive command, which is Tefillah. He writes that Elu hazmanim einam leikuva rak lemitzvah. The zmanei tefillah, they're not ma'akev.
Oh.
They can be dispensed with. They're a mitzvah lechatchila, but they're not ma'akev.
Not ma'akev midoraisa or midorabanan?
Period.
That's a hot take.
And the Sha'agas Aryeh takes him to task, as we said. This is Siman Tedvav, and brings several proofs that this is absurd. Here's one proof. This is Brachot Kafchet Sof Amud Aleph. Kol hamitpalel tefillah shel musafin lachar sheva shaot leRabbi Yehuda alav katuv omer. This is a verse in Spania, 3:18. Nugei mimoed asafti mimech. What does that mean? So Rashi explains mimoed mechamat shehaviru moedei hatfilot v'chagim yu nugim v'asufim v'kalim. Since they didn't observe the times of prayer. Now, again, when it comes to Musaf in the Mishnah, there's a difference of opinion where Rabbanan hold that it's Kol Hayom, and Rabbi Yehuda says Musaf is only till Sheva Sha'ot. But if you go beyond that, so then you get this curse, I would call it, Nugei Mimoed or something. Nugei is you Nugim. They will be sad, Vasufim B'Kalim, and they will be destroyed. And then it says, Kol mitkalel tefillah shel shacharit, lachar bashot. Rabbi Yehuda, again, there's a machlok, Kohen Rabbanon, you can daven shachri until chatzot. Rabbi Yehuda gives you only until arbashot.
But the point being is that, these zmanim, the prescribed times for prayer, are really significant and not just a nice little minhag that could be brushed away when they're inconvenient for us.
Yeah, but even more than you're called a posheya. Now here's another proof of the Sha'agas Aryeh. This is Brachot Sof Amud Aleph. There's a verse in Kohelet, Ecclesiastes 1:15, Ma'uvat lo yuchal litkon, which means if you pervert something, you cannot fix it up. And that's interpreted to mean Zeh should be tel Kriyat Shema shel Arvit, Kriyat Shema shel Shacharit, or Tefillah shel Arvit, or Tefillah shel Shacharit. So again, it's not something that you can rectify. So the Gemara asks, but we know there is a concept of tashlumin. If I didn't daven Shacharit, I'll daven twice Mincha. If I didn't daven Mincha, I'll daven twice Arvit. So the way that's justified by the Gemara is Hacha b'maya sikinan should be tel b'meizid. So you're only called me'uvad lo yuchal litkon if b'meizid, willingly, you derelict. But if it was b'shogeg, then you have this concept of tashlumin. But anyway, the Sha'agas Aryeh's point is so well taken that what do you mean that it's enam le'ikuva rak le'mitzvah? Of course, it's ma'akev.
It seems like a very compelling argument to me, and this is all preceding the Chassidic movement, right?
Now, Ramosha, the thought occurred to me: why is the Sha'agas Aryeh engaging with the Megillat Esther? Now, this is just pure speculation on my part, but you have to know the dates of the Sha'agas Aryeh. When did he live? So his name is Rabbi Aryeh Leib Ginsburg. He actually has a name. We know him as Sha'agas Aryeh after his book, but at the
every bar mitzvah bacher when he gives his pshatel.
At the bris, he was given the name Aryeh Leib. He wasn't called yet Sha'agas Aryeh. He lives from 1695 to 1785, which means he's a contemporary of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov is born either 1698, Nachat, in Chassidic tradition, according to the secular story, in 1700, and signs off 1760. So the Sha'agas Aryeh is born 1695, 1785. As I said, this Hasidic practice of relaxing the times of prayer comes up very early in the movement. And the thought occurred to me, perhaps the Sha'agas Aryeh wants to head that off. Now, I don't know of any Hasidic works that invoke the authority of the Megillas Esther. As I said, the great Hasidic Rebbe, Yoel Teitelbaum, invoked the authority of Megillas Esther to inveigh against mass aliyah to Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
By the way, he was notorious for davening after the Zman. He would daven Mincha after Tzeisa Kochavim. I don't know whether he was relying on the Megillas Esther, but that thought occurred to me. Why is the Sha'agas Aryeh even engaging with the Megillas Esther? It's such a preposterous position. Maybe there were Hasidic masters who might have invoked the authority of the Megillas Esther, and the Sha'agas Aryeh wanted to head it off. I made inquiry, was there any hisnagdus, use your term, of the Sha'agas Aryeh to the Hasidic movement? And I asked my Rebbe, the great Gaon, Rabbi Shlomo Fisher, Zichron Livracha, and he said, in the lifetime of the Sha'agas Aryeh, there was one machlokus with Rabbi Chil Halperin, the Baal Seder Doros in Minsk, but he never came across a machlokus between the Sha'agas Aryeh and this nascent Hasidic movement. Sha'agas Aryeh produced two great Talmidim. The most famous is Reb Chaim Volozhner, who in Nefesh HaChaim, there are chapters which are sandwiched between two sha'arim. which I'm told did not appear in the first edition, Nefesh Chaim. They appeared later. Some say the Hasidim were able to suppress those chapters, but Reb Chaim Volozhner is vehement against the fact that the Hasidim are not observing these zmanei tefillah. He said he came to a place, a certain Hasidic community, where they believe that you're not allowed to daven mincha until after Tzeisa Kochavim, which is absurd.
So, well, this is actually something I wanted to get some clarity on. Maybe you could help me. Is the disregard for the traditional standards of zmanim, is that a principled rejection that we should not be bound by time? Or is it, just not that we have anything against zmanim, just I don't know, I hate to say it this way, almost like, oh, people prefer to get up later in the day, and it's easier to daven Shacharis at 10 a.m. Shabbos morning than 8 a.m. or whatever it is. I mean, where's this coming from? And like, there's
Yeah.
so many areas of halacha that one could potentially bend the rules and make life easier on. Why was it zmanim in particular
Yeah.
that they decided to kind of unravel, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I want to speak to that. That's a wonderful question, but I had alluded to the fact that the Sha'agas Aryeh had two great Talmidim. So the more, as he was called, Rabbi Kohen, who became a Rav in that triple community of Altona, Hamburg, Wandsbek, who was actually sympathetic to the Hasidic movement. So I don't know whether Sha'agas Aryeh is directing this against Hasidism. But to go back to your question, which is wonderful, I had mentioned that somebody who's very important in this discussion is Hayudi Kadosh, Pshischa. And I'm getting two different versions of what he said. One is through the Ishbitzer Rebbe, Meir Shiloach, which a lot of people are studying Ishbitzer Hasidus, Meir Shiloach. And this is in Chelek Sheni, it's in Parshat Balotcha, and it's Dibur HaMatchil Al Pi Hashem Yachanu Al Pi Hashem Yisa'u. And the Ishbitzer says, he quotes a pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Yud Pasuk Lamed Bet Siftei Tzadik Yed Un Ratzon, that the tzaddik knows the Ratzon, the will of Hashem, and he writes Vayudia Kadosh B'Doro Ra'a Ratzon Hashem Yitbarach B'Ichur Zman Tfilah. He said the holy Jew, he saw in his generation that it's the will of God to procrastinate, to delay the time of prayer. So that sounds like it's lechatchila, right? However, there's a wonderful Sefer Shelot Shuvot by the Kosher Glover Rav. I have to explain who he is. His photo, last time I was in Gottesman Library, on the upper level of Gottesman Library, this man's photo was hanging on the wall. His name was Rabbi Aryeh Tzvi Fromer. In Yiddish, he was called Leib Hirsch Fromer. He was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer, of the Sachet. For a while, he was the Rashiva of Sachet, and eventually he becomes Rashiva of Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin. Very important yeshiva. Out of it came people such as Pinchas Hirschsprung of Montreal. There came out giants out of that yeshiva. Unfortunately, the yeshiva and the Rosh Yeshiva were destroyed in the Holocaust. So he was one of the martyrs, one of the Kedoshim. And if you get a hold of his Shelot Shuvot Eretz Tzvi, and this is at the end of Siman Kuf Chaf Aleph, chapter 121, this is what he conveys from Hayudia Kadosh Mipshischa. Limud Zchut, he uses that term Limud Zchut. So it's not a lechatchila, it's a way of trying to reconcile a very problematic practice that Jews are involved in. And he writes, Limud zchut al matchil litpalel b'zman tefillah, af shenimshach achar hazman. If someone starts before the cutoff, so let's say you start shacharit before chatzot, before noon, and you continue afterwards.
Yeah.
So he writes, and again he's quoting Hayudia Kadosh Mipshischa, Chashuv Keilo Hamitpalel Kol Atfilah Bismana. So
Well,
it's
that's like
considered
with Bilam being able to start the curse right in that split second, and then
exactly.
okay,
So
got it.
the Yid Hakadosh, he quoted a Tosfos. This is in Brachot
Right.
Zayin, and it says there that there's a rega each day. There's a moment each day when God is angry, and God says, "You Jewish people are so lucky that that day I wasn't angry. Otherwise, Bilam would have utilized that rega to curse you, but he never had the opportunity because that day I skipped." And so Tosfos asked the question, since it's just an instant, what could Bilam have possibly said? So there's two terutzim in Tosfos. The first is that Bilam could have said one word, kalem, destroy them. 3 letters, two syllables. But the second teretz is that he doesn't have to get it all into the rega. He has to start in that rega, and he can continue the curse afterwards, and that way he'll be mazik. He will cause damage to the Jewish people. And the Yudia Kadosh trailed off. The Choshe came b'midat tova merubah. The mitchil itpalel b'zman tefillah. The Gemara achar the Choshe kilo itpalel kol hashmon esrei b'zman. So, it's a kal v'chomer. If, when it comes to curses, it works, so all the more so when it comes to blessings and Shmon Esrei, as long as you began it, let's say even a moment before Chatzot, and you continue afterwards, it's considered as if you daven Bismana. So there are two answers to your question, Rabbi Kurtz. Was it a lechatchila or b'devet? According to the Ishbitzer, it sounds like it was a lechatchila on the part of Yudia Kadosh. According to the Kodesh Press, that's again Rabbi Perish Fromer, Aryeh Tzvi Fromer, it was just a limud zchut.
Interesting. So I appreciate that nuance there, that this is giving me an added layer of understanding that even within this Misnagdim versus Hasidim debate, within the Hasidic camp, there is some difference of opinion. Even, we can't just say they wholesale disregarded zmanim. I mean, some were maybe doing that, but some of them were operating on halachic principles, like this idea of the Tosas with Bilam, that enabled more flexibility than maybe normative practice would have accepted, but still within the realm of halachic mechanisms. So that's a useful clarification. And just as we're kind of like getting to the wrap up, this is also a little bit of a sociological historical question. We know there have been many throughout the ages of the Jewish people, many of the breakoffs from the mainstream kind of went along the same lines. I mean, I know it sounds like a gross oversimplification, but Lahavdil, when we think about, during the Second Temple era with the Jesus movement, their main argument was, again, well, you go back to Korach based on the Midrashim or Soloveitchik's Drushos, but basically putting the laws to the side. I mean, every major breakoff, I mean, to reform movement today, a lot of them are basically just saying we're too legalistic. It's time to dispense with these archaic halachos. And for some reason, the Korach rebellion, the Jesus movement, the reform, all of that has been pushed out from what we would call Orthodox Judaism today. But for some reason, the Hasidic Welt, not only are they accepted, but they comprise a pretty significant part of it. And I don't know if that's part of the reason why, but we could go to a Hasidic shul today. Maybe I won't go to the later minyanim because I want to keep to the standard zmanim, but no one would question their kashrus. No one would question their ability to serve as an aid on a ksuba or for a chuppah. So why wasn't this ultimately something in the end of the day that was a deal breaker?
Well, I want to give you a treat, and then
I
I
like
want to
treats.
respond in greater depth. But the treat is I discovered that in KAJ, which is Kahala Adas Yeshurun, which is the Breuer's Kahila, which comes out of Frankfurt,
Yeah.
their minhag, and you know the yekis, as they're called, the
Mhm. They're very punctual.
German Jews. Okay, so this we kind of have come to expect such things from Hasidim, but I was shocked to learn that that was the minhag of the Breuer's Kahila. Going back to Frankfurt. These are very old minhagim, by the way. But there's a work, Makor Baruch, by the Baal Torah Tamima, Rabbi Halevi Epstein, whose father was the Aruch HaShulchan, Rabbi Chiel Michel Epstein. And he writes that his father did shimush under the Tzemach Tzedek, that's Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, the first Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch. And according to Rabbi Halevi Epstein, and the Lubavitchers will deny this, but Eitam Henkin thought it could have taken place. Eitam Henkin, Hashem Yikom Damo.
Right.
Supposedly, the Tzemach Tzedek said, "Oh, you think that we Hasidim hate you, misnagdim? No, we have the greatest hakar satov to you. We have gratitude to you because if it wasn't for you, we would have gone off.
Uh-huh.
We could have become an outright antinomian, anti-halachic movement,
Right.
and it was the Vilna Gaon and Reb Chaim Volozhiner. You people kept us within the guardrails. By the
Mm.
way, that's a fascinating historical question. Did Reb Chaim Volozhiner meet Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi? According to Beis Rebbe, which is a hagiography of the Rebbeim of Chabad, there actually was such a meeting between Reb Chaim Volozhiner, who was the Talmud Muvak, the eminent disciple of the Vilna Gaon, and the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, Reb Shneir Zalman. I asked this to my Rebbe, Reb Aaron Soloveitchik, Zechariah Levrach, who is a direct descendant of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and he thought for a moment, and it's possible after the death of the Vilna Gaon.
Mm.
But what we do know is that into the next generation, there was a historic meeting of Reb Itzela Volozhiner, that's the son of Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and the Tzemach Tzedek. So to answer your question, and it's a great question. How is it that Hasidism didn't go off the rails, like Christianity, Lahavdil, or Sabbateanism, Shabtai Tzvi?
Yeah.
So, according to the Makor Baruch, it was the Misnagdim who actually prevented that from happening. But again, in Lubavitch, they will tell you that this is poppycock. What you're reading in the Makor Baruch is not history; it's fantasy.
Well, speeding up, to modern day, you could pass on this question if you don't want to address it. Um, I come from the more yeshivish Welt, where there's some Hasidic exposure. Definitely the Litvische Welt and Chassidic Welt are not as disparate as they used to be. But certainly, when I came to YU, to Yeshiva University, I read Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamp's Torah Mada. I was going all in on like Torah and academics and whatnot. And then I get there, and I'm not saying the whole place was like this, but I went to, I'm not going to say the name, but I went to a gap year program, and then to YU, and there was, like Neo Hasidus was all the rage. People were kind of,
Mm.
instead of, focusing maybe more on intensive lumdish studies, there was a little bit more kumbaya kind of stuff, maybe a little bit of obsession with Shmir Sabris for some reason. I'm just curious, as an expert and scholar in kind of the Hasidic literature writ large. What's your perspective on this neo-Hasidic development?
It's not new.
I guess we'll need, yeah.
Neo-Hasidism is not neo. It's really old hat. It goes back, well, there were a few players. Hillel Zeitlin is an important player. Martin Buber, Abraham Joshua Heschel, whom we mentioned before. So that's number one. It's not new. This is Gilgul of something that was going on. Starting before War One already, with Hillel Zeitlin was gathering groups in Varsha. But the question is, where are we going with this?
Yeah.
Let's not get stuck in the past. Where are we going with this? And again, I strive to be a Talmud of Rav Kook, and Rav Kook is someone who's trying to bridge the gap between Hasidism and Misnagdism, where you have the best elements of both. You have the rigor, the analysis of the Litvish tradition, Lithuanian Talmudism, and you have the dveikus of Hasidism. The ecstasy and serving God with joy. If do it Hashem b'simcha. And the two of them coming together to bring back nivuah, to bring back prophecy, because again, to go back to the Rambam, you need both. You need the the intellect and the imagination. Rambam says something very interesting. I think it's tongue in cheek. He says there's three kinds of people. There are people who are just intellect. We call them chachamim. There are people who are just imagination. We call them politicians. And then there's the rare breed that's able to fuse the two of them, intellect and imagination. And those people we call Nevi'im. So out of this beautiful synthesis of Hasidism and Misnagdism, you have potential for Nevuah. So, I'm more excited about that than about Neo-Hasidism.
Well, I think this is a good note to conclude on, and I just want to give a shout out to our mutual friend Rabbi Alec Goldstein from Kodesh Press who introduced us. We'll make sure to link your author profile in the show notes. That way, listeners who are interested in learning more of your scholarship can purchase your works that are available online. And Rabbi Naor, I just want to thank you very much again for coming on the podcast and sharing this really intriguing topic with us.
Well, thank you. It's been very enjoyable.
Thank you.